and one blunt warning screamed across their networks when a spectrum of alarm coursed through every alien empire. Human warship detected. Once thought dead, humanity had come home, and its recently crafted ship boiled with a threat that could upset galactic equilibrium with one enraged pass. Well before the disastrous alert decimated the grounds of the alien empires believed they had cornered the entire arm of the spiral. They had mapped out the optimum trade routes, siphoned untold resources, and methodically crushed or assimilated any race that defied their dominion. They were recognized without contest throughout innumerable star systems. Sophisticated fleets had coalesced, cradled by centuries of militaristic custom, ensuring no threat could challenge their sum, most especially not that of the humans, a race they had allegedly subjugated decades before. The collapse of Earth and its colonies had been systematic. A coalition of species, some motivated by xenophobic fervor, others attracted by the promise of new homes, had taken to human worlds. Historians noted how badly outgunned, outmanned human forces fought bravely, only to crack under the coalition's methodical onslaughts. Cities turned to glass under plasma bombardments. Blockades starved entire populations from orbit. Once Earth fell, the triumphant admirals of that coalition declared humanity extinguished. The last pockets of resistance had apparently been wiped away, lest even a remnant spark a revolt in the future. In the decades after, the alien empires thrived. They pushed trade pacts, creating rivalries and alliances in a never-settled dance of politics. Dreadnoughts, raw with the latest in weaponry, guaranteed that their power went unrivaled. There was, among these species, a feeling of comfortable superiority. If they had defeated humanity, once said to be capable of unpredictable genius, what could stand in their way? But whispers never quite faded away. It was whispered in the margins, shared in back rooms and unlicensed spaceports. Mysterious reports of a very clean vehicle, likely human in origin, that appears in remote systems for a moment before fading again. Records of lost alien patrols found with unexplainable blast patterns. Skeptics dismiss the stories as tall tales from desperate smugglers. Really, how could a single warship ever elude the combined vigilance of so many advanced empires? Unknown to most, a small handful of human survivors had indeed escaped extinction. They fled the ruin of their homeworlds and fled to the darkest reaches of the galaxy. They worked in secret shipyards for decades, fueled by a mixture of righteous fury and a desperate need for revenge. With no official resources or safe harbor, these outcasts resourcefully scavenged whatever they could repurpose: alien technology, stealth modules, experimental power cores. They crafted a vessel, layer by layer, that represented all the grit of the human spirit. And at the center of this classified device were its architects, figures whose names were simply whispered. The commander, icily emotionless after he had seen the last hour on his home planet. The tactician, whose ability to orchestrate cunning maneuvers had bested greater armadas. The lead engineer, a wizard of repurposed hardware, said to combine ancient Terran philosophies with pilfered extraterrestrial inventions. Their joint mission remained the same: restore humankind's rightful place in the cosmos at any cost. It was unlike anything the alien empires could even envision, the creation of a human warship with no traceable existence. It had maze-like webs of interconnected systems, hidden warp drives, a skin of exotic composites filched from a dozen different enemy designs and weapons arrays that pushed the boundaries of even what one single starfaring species could conceive. "I'm on your side," the pilot promised, but even the ship's silhouette was strange, bladed, predatory, but slinky enough to slip under next-generation detection grids. For decades, these human engineers and tacticians tested, refined, and perfected their clandestine craft. Meanwhile, the empires continued their accustomed business, unaware that a thunderhead was gathering on the horizon. And then finally, the curtain of secrecy came down. The warship would first make a dramatic appearance in a remote system where several alien powers competed control of an outpost rich with rare materials. It was a grim realization that the sensor log confirmed the most gruesome aspect of the entire ordeal. Entire fleets had been lost, and none lived to provide a recount of events. In silence, Only unrecognizable scraps of twisted metal drifted. Alarmed, the local alien warlords called urgent councils, suspecting an outside competitor. None suspected that it was humanity, long thought dead, who had brought the destruction. In the places where the sightings multiplied, panic settled in. Stalwart admirals declared that no one ship, however sophisticated, could destroy entire task forces. But the evidence mounted. Half-shredded hulls, with scorch marks that matched no known weapon signature, capital ships drifting, shattered, in systems that once churned with commerce. The warships' attacks became increasingly flagrant, and the alien governments competed with each other to identify the threat with ever greater intensity. They rifled through archives looking for any clue that could explain a design so lethal and elusive. And some recalled, in soft, fearful voices, the rough-edged creativity and determination humans once offered. News flew along major hyperlane relays. Alert! Human ship of war appeared. Alien empires are in panic. The message flashed on every single subspace frequency. Diplomatic conferences could hardly contain eruptions of paranoia. Merchant guilds brought shipments to a halt, unwilling to risk the journey. The machinery of an entire galactic network began to grind to a halt, beset by an invisible hand none had foreseen. Alarm gave way to dread as various powers came to the terrible realization, too late, that their centuries of confidence were now hanging by a thread. And through all of this confusion, the humans on their warship continued with iron determination. It was more than revenge for them. It was survival, a last stand to demonstrate that no empire could snuff out the human spirit. Their perspective was no longer meek or fearful. They had flourished in clandestine havens, bonded by the recollection of a charred earth and shattered aspirations. With each new strike, they dismantled the illusions of alien invincibility. But for all its might, the human warship was just one ship, an audacious gamble. If caught in a compromised state, or outflanked by a vast extraterrestrial armada, humanity's final chance for survival could meet violent termination in one cataclysmic defeat. That knowledge drove the ship's crew on, creating a bond between them in an oath of defiance. They wouldn't just battle for their own revenge, but to avenge every lost life, every dream that had once flourished on Earth's surface, their entire legacy that alien bombs had sought to obliterate. And so, as the galaxy writhed with these newfound revelations, the stage was laid. Equipped with unimaginable technology, armed with undaunted will, humanity had returned to the void. 1,000 alien admirals trembled at the possibilities. Generals began the process of uniting in a frenzied effort to hunt down and annihilate this new threat. But one question haunted them. Could a millennia-old empire really withstand the renewed wrath of humankind? Now that question loomed above all. Alien dominators, bleached human refugees, opportunistic traitors, like an ominous shade. And in the kith of sleek hull of the warship, the commander and their loyal officers were preparing for their next step too, knowing that their gambit would either shatter the alien stranglehold or send humanity back into oblivion. The ruling councils of the alien empires quickly fell into a state of panic. The first wave of sightings incited confusion and rejection. But when fleets continued to go missing and more warship debris peppered previously safe star lanes, denial gave way to widespread fright. Planners rushed to impose system-wide blockades, ordering every sector to instrument traffic through heavily fortified choke points. Membrane zones quivered with newly installed turrets and scanning beacons. But no matter how many lines of defense they erected, the elusive human warship found weaknesses. In the knowledge that they might soon become uneasily acquainted with a former enemy, a federation of the largest alien powers created a consensus coalition, sharing intelligence on warp aberrations, warhead signatures, and whatever scraps of human technology they could find the embers. There were no consistent patterns found, as with conventional scanning. The fear they encountered was abstract, a specter that swooped into one industry, tore through it, and then disappeared as suddenly as it arrived. As the humans pursued their war, the warship of men continued a methodical campaign. Every single target had been chosen with surgical deliberation. An industrial outpost critical to an alien empire's shipbuilding, a heavily fortified supply hub keeping the invasion forces fed and watered, a communications relay crucial for coordinating defenses. The tactician aboard had pored over the alien alliances for decades, charting strategic weaknesses. Rather than directly engaging the huge fleets, the warship hit where it would cause the most logistical harm. Those small fissures increased with each act of sabotage, sustaining the Empire's belief in their looming demise. In the hull's nerve center, advanced consoles showed live feed streaming from a web of hidden probes. The commander, calculated and rational, measured the risk of each strike. The team was small. Each infiltration or skirmish had deadly stakes. But nothing was going to lay a grasp of reluctance in these hallways. They were driven to action by the memory of Earth's pulverized continents, and their own settlers being sacrificed to die alone in the emptiness of space. Even so, the Empire's aggregate strength should not have been underestimated. Each alien species had centuries of careful warfare under its belt. Within weeks, their admirals had devised new doctrines to trap the warship. They laid ambush, saturating whole star systems in sensor webs. Some nearly succeeded. Twice the warship had been pinned by a barrage of carriers, its scanners screaming as wave after wave of drone fighters rose from their decks. The engineer, working frantically, released a collection of hacking tools, adapting code designed to infiltrate antiquated Terran data labs, to scramble the drones' operating logic. Pandemonium erupted as the drones attacked one another, buying just enough time for the warship's engines to spool up a warp jump and escape. These near misses sparked tensions internally and externally. Having tasted near defeat, the human crew redoubled their vigilance. Each daring escape raised morale, but the prospect of being the last refuge of humankind entered everybody's mind. The commander paced the bridge, torn between determination and apprehension. Each of those plans needed to be executed perfectly, or the overarching dream of resurgence would die. On top of these military movements was another form of conflict lurking: psychological warfare. The tactician crafted clever messages that were deliberately leaked to alien networks. Communications made in guttural, warlike languages, referring to human retribution, the illusions of domination by parasites, and a final reckoning. Only fragments made it into the ears of alien admirals, and they used them to fuel their nightmares. Rumors began to circulate that the humans may have joined forces with other oppressed species. Even more unsettling was the fear that the one warship was a vanguard for a larger, hidden force. Around the same time, alien diplomatic envoys embarked on frantic missions to neutral or minor powers, begging for assistance hunting down the human threat. Their proposals were often met with wary ears. Other, lesser-known civilizations, chafing under centuries of oppression, looked to the rumored human resurgence with cautious hope. A few even began telegraphing false data to the great empires, or secretly channeling resources to places the humans were known to operate. It turned into a shadow war fought in intelligence circles, marked by sabotage and deception that the empires, in their pride, could not keep in check. On the warship, the next audacious move took hold. The tactician detected a gigantic alien shipyard in orbit around a resource-rich gas giant. Every day, that shipyard was producing new cruisers, clapped together from the spoils of conquered lands. If it were destroyed, it would cripple the Empire's local supply lines for months. But the base was protected by a ring of sentinel satellites and a feared super dreadnought. Going into that domain risked going head-to-head with the biggest alien warship in the sector. Despite the risk, the plan was in place. Conceived in secret war rooms, the operation planned for a multi-pronged infiltration. Decoy fleets would rendezvous via remote drones, mimicking the warship's energy profile to entice defenders away from the genuine infiltration route. Meanwhile, specialized stealth craft, just glorified disposable cargo pods mounted on thrusters, would land sabotage teams onto the shipyard. Timing had to be just right at every step. A single misfire, a single anomaly in the scans, and the entire infiltration could devolve into a suicidal fiasco. The crew of the warship prepared in hushed intensity in the days before the strike. Weapons were reconfigured, infiltration kits double-checked, and backup infiltration teams rehearsed over and over. So did resolve, unwavering, threaded through every corridor. It was that kind of mission that could determine whether humanity came out utterly triumphant or vanished for good. As The hour approached. The warship covertly entered the fringes of the system, cloaked in a field of cosmic dust. Satellite feeds from the infiltration pods had relayed the ring of sentinel drones circling the shipyard. Sure enough, the super dreadnought was stationed there, surrounded by a fleet of advanced cruisers. The commander nodded back to the tactician. Everything was in position. As soon as the signal went out, the decoy fleets activated on the opposite side of the system, emanating energy signatures designed to match the unique warp field of the warship. Panicked, the Empire's defenders turned, directing half their cruisers rushing to meet the phony danger. This left the super dreadnought with a thinner perimeter, still formidable but with gaps. The warship took its opportunity, hitting thumping short bursts from its thrusters to flare through sensor blind spots. The infiltration pods continued their advance, their stealth coatings leaching scans, bending sonar, deflecting laser pulses. The infiltration itself was dangerous business. The pods attached to the underside of the shipyard, where gravity plating was sparse. Inside, a handful of human operatives materialized, stony-faced, equipped with silent cutting implements and demolition charges. They progressed through access tunnels festooned with alien passages, shutting down cameras and rewriting security protocols. Above this hair-raising infiltration, the warship loomed as a safe vantage, prepared to bring hellfire down on it at the first stink of discovery. But the defenders twigged sooner than expected. No ploy was perfect. One wayward sentinel satellite, hovering just askew of its patrol route, picked up minute disturbances. Alarms blared throughout the shipyard's control room. Alarms howled. As the alien garrison from the ship scrambled to respond, the infiltration team ramped up their sabotage, planting charges on central reactor lines. Gunfire echoed in the halls during sporadic firefights, leaving smoke and strobing lights in its wake. The pilots in the infiltration pods reported they were pinned down. Having an immediate reaction, the commander tasked to make a direct attack run to divert defenders. The warship erupted from cover, its main cannons punching the shipyard's odeftidal fences. Jeweled lances of energy from the super dreadnought retaliated in kind, tearing up the warship's shields. Bulkheads bent and groaned under pressure and consoles flared with sparks, but the human crew would not break formation. They responded with tungsten slugs, fired to gut-churning velocities that tore gaping holes in the super dreadnought's plating. In the chaos, the infiltration team has completed their sabotage, those charges rigged to explode on a synchronized timer. They ran back and ascended into the pods. The warship flew dangerously near to pull them out, sustaining punishing turret fire from the shipyard. Hull plating melted in spots, and atmosphere vented from the decks sealed by emergency force fields. And yet the pods docked, and the infiltration team boarded the pods. Desperate to avert disaster, the shipyard's overseers attempted to jettison the compromised reactor lines. Too late. In a matter of moments, a chain reaction detonated in a brilliant flash that vaporized entire volumes of the orbiting structure. Shockwaves reverberated through every ship in the sector. The super dreadnought, rocked by that passing barrage of wreckage, shook off its axis, leaving it vulnerable. Seizing the opportunity, the warship opened up with a punishing volley from its forward cannons, ahead of weak points identified by the engineer's scans. A violent explosion erupted along the dreadnought's midsection. It could have survived such a strike under normal conditions, but hammered on multiple fronts, breached energy lines, it fell at last. The dreadnought tore, its punctured hull shredding into a shower of superheated metal. Petrified alien crews ejected. En masse, their escape pods strewing the stars. In the control rooms of distant Empire capitals, gaze aghast, watchers of real-time feeds. The watched as the dreaded super dreadnought's last moments unfolded, recorded at frantic surviving cruisers. Every shining frame, an indictment of their own overconfidence. One human warship, they thought, has just brought down one of our mightiest sentinels. A state of panic ricocheted among the highest echelon of power. Through the swirling wreckage, the human warship regrouped its infiltration pods and staggered out of range, bruised but whole. Behind them, the shipyard crumbled, along with months of new vessels that would never enter service. Alien fleets all across the Nilum saw the transmission logs filled with scrambling messages, ordering a retreat, repositioning. This time, once again, the indomitable craft had wrought an improbable circumstance into a staggering blow against the Empire's war machine. But that victory came at a high price. The human warship's hull was gouged in several places, shielding generators near burnout, while many members of the infiltration teams were injured or worse. The engineer shouted commands in triage, trying to stabilize critical systems. The tactician updated strategic maps, noting which enemy factions might now try a direct counterassault. The commander, physically spent, returned to the blackness of the warship's scarred hulls, sorrow flickering across their eyes for the dead and the almost dead. They had survived. They had landed a telling blow. But how many more times could they afford such audacious bets? The galaxy, from every vantage point, now understood that humanity was back, and it was terrifying. The war extended well beyond immediacy. Trade routes halted, alliances frayed, minor states reassessed their loyalties. New waves of sabotage washed over as more formerly cowed species drew courage from humanity's example, while others harried supply lines and boycotted repressive measures. As the warship tended to its injuries, the alien empires understood it was only a matter of time. And thus, the unstoppable wave of human defiance had begun in earnest. Fear gave way to chaos, and in the eye of that storm, the warship of mankind advanced, inching them towards a day when no empire could ever again threaten to wipe them from the cosmic quilt. The climactic confrontation brewed on the fringes of a celestial expanse called the Raphria Corridor, whom a strategic nexus connecting diverse alien strongholds. And it was a place steeped in myth and legend among the alien races, overlooked by vast, swirling nebulas. Historically, a place of great battles and final stand, the corridor now prepared for the most significant confrontation in generations. Whispers began of the alien empires, joined together by a siege mentality, constructing a massive fleet led by their newly named flagship. This behemoth warship had layered shielding that no known weapon could breach. Crewed by hand-picked elite crews of all the major species, the flagship was a final statement. All of the power of the galaxy distilled into a single unstoppable weapon. The battered human warship had retreated into the labyrinth of drifting asteroids that filled the corridor around them to the brink of the causeway. Using salvage plates to patch the hull breaches, the engineer's crew worked continuously to return at least partial functionality. Supplies ran low. Morale grew thin. The commander, ever stoic, offered words of quiet encouragement, reminding that the next battle could determine the fate of humankind in the galaxy. The tactician, studying intelligence, gathered from intercepted transmissions, outlined the alien strategy. The dreadnoughts and support cruisers would meet at the corridor's center and forge an inescapable blockade. The flagship would remain central, leading squadrons of advanced fighters. Even decoy tactics or infiltration attempts may not be enough when coverage is so dense. The tactician's face tightened. It would not be enough to simply infiltrate this time. They had to stand and fight a superior force head-on, an almost unimaginable scenario given their one ship. But giving up was not in the cards. The commander and the tactician called the senior crew members to one last war council. They considered every possible plan. You could just try to distract the fleet as best you could, like getting people to chase their own ghost or sabotage them. But the alien admirals had begun to go a bit paranoid, less likely to chase phantasms. One other plan suggested stealth infiltration of the flagship, but data indicated there were monstrosities of internal security. They finally determined that to obliterate the delusions of alien superiority once and for all, they would force to face up to the flagship itself, landing a crippling blow proudly visible to every starfaring onlooker. This logic had a grimness that descended on the warship like a funeral shroud. They all knew how intimidating it would be, but they also knew the galaxy was watching. If the human warship defeated the ultimate symbol of alien power, alliances might splinter beyond repair, and a new age where humanity could negotiate, or simply live, without slavery by aliens might dawn. Days went by in anxious anticipation. The corridor came alive with the activation of thousands upon thousands of alien vessels queuing in formation. The silhouette of the flagship, a knife of menace flaring with the sunlight of thruster plumes, dwarfed anything humanity had faced before. Charged with newly developed cannons, said to be unstoppable, it was the result of everything the Empire had learned from previous defeats. Finally, the moment arrived. The human warship plowed out of the gloom into the cool intensity of the corridor, purposefully plumbing its presence. The response was swift. Reinforced by waves of fighters, alien destroyers surged forward in a pincer movement. But the commander would not be drawn into a chaotic skirmish. Instead, the warship pressed forward with deliberate precision, raining carefully timed volleys of railgun fire that eviscerated lighter craft. The engineer, focused on the redoubts, kept the shield array at minimal power until the last possible moment, conserving precious energy. When the warship breached the outer circle of defenders, the flagship showed its terrible might. A rain of blazing beams streaked out, each wide enough to engulf a small cruiser. The warship's alarms blared. The commander cut the ship to minimize cross-moment damage. Still, one beam seared a strip of armor plating, and the corridors beyond it began venting atmosphere. Another beam sliced off half the dorsal array, rendering sensors inoperative. Gritting their teeth, the tactician activated a craft salary defensive measure, a cluster of shield drones all interlinked to project overlapping fields to absorb the next barrage. The move spared the warship from immediate destruction, even if it meant the drones were destroyed in the process. Infuriated by the human warship's continued existence, the alien admirals released the overwhelming majority of their armada. Missiles swarmed. EMP torpedoes streaked in. The decks of the warship shook as if it were an animate target. Each wave that successfully blocked or jammed required a toll in scarce resources. Engineering department fire, leading to the panicked evacuation of some compartments. And the commander's voice rang with calm resolve as he issued the order to hold formation. In a brilliant bluff, the tactician pretended to retreat, swinging the warship like it was about to run away. That brief pause on the part of the aliens was just what the humans needed. The warship's ventral bay opened and a swarm of specialized drones poured out. In previous engagements, these had been useful for infiltration or minor distractions. Now they were armed with high-yield warheads, each programmed for remote detonation once they got close to the alien vessels. Drones rocketed across the battlefield, filling sensors with false signals and deliberate launches of numerous decoy warp signatures. Pandemonium broke out among the defenders. Squadrons were scrambled to intercept the drone swarm. Some were successful, but enough got through and wreaked havoc. The formation erupted into small holes as explosions forced the aliens to recalculate. The corridor reverberated with the roar of detonations. Grabbing the opportunity, the human warship punched a hole directly to the flagship, scrapping lesser cruisers. This was the moment of truth. The flagship's ruling admiral, a wily one, known for past conquests, ordered all energy to the forward arrays. As the warship approached, the flagship's cannons belched arcs of deadly energy. One beam struck the warship's starboard side, mangling several decks. Another hammered the engines. For a moment, it seemed the human craft could split apart beneath the monstrous attack. The commander, brutalized against a bulkhead, hollered for the engineer to route emergency power to structural supports. The whole hull shuddered ominously, almost cracking. But the warship pressed on fire in spots, losing altitude thrusters by the second. From its battered bow, a final weapon system extended itself. A great rail lance that the tactician had intentionally withheld from previous engagements. Even the alien admirals, poring over frantic readouts, found it difficult to understand the energy accumulation at the warship's front. In a god shudder that shook vacuum, the warship cast its final blow. A hypervelocity slug enveloped in unstable energy. The missile screamed through the void at impossible velocity, biting into the flagship's iridescent armor. For a split second, the shield flared a bright, blinding white, and then it disintegrated in a rippling curve of fractal light. The projectile, still carrying raw force, struck directly into the flagship's heart. Engines thundered, and shockwaves cascaded through the giant vessel, bucking, reinforced plating and igniting detonations throughout its depths. The Goliath cannons of the flagship sputtered, then went quiet. Within seconds, secondary explosions erupted, exploding along its spine. Reports of a meltdown in progress screamed through over-communication lines from alien captains. Such a cataclysmic scene pressed every observer. The biggest, most powerful ship the galaxy's major empires had ever put into the field, destroyed in seconds by a single shot. Astonished silence swept over the alien fleet, shock freezing them in place. The commander and tactician in the human warship, thoroughly pummeled, watched sensor screens with relief and sadness. They had committed an atrocity, but at a terrible price to their own ship. Once the enemy's symbol of strength was ripped apart, the majority of the alien fleet fled in chaos and panic, not knowing how to proceed. Others made a final, vengeful strike at the warship. But united leadership had fractured, and no coherent chain of command existed to harness their numbers effectively. Pinned by its own damage, the warship drifted among the wreckage, picking off those few who dared approach. No longer faced with an organized assault, the crew worked desperately to maintain life support and extinguish fires. The news zipped through the hyperlane networks in moments. The indomitable flagship defeated by the fabled human military vessel. For generations, the alien powers had bragged that no other force in the galaxy could stand against their combined might. That hubris lay in ruins. With one final, decisive blow, man had broken the facade of an invulnerable empire. When the smoke cleared, the warship was leaning dangerously, its engines choking. Tech teams scrambled to jerry-rig rudimentary power relays. By then, the tactician, surveying the field, took in the alien cruiser's braking formation in confusion. The hull was cluttered with spinning wrecks and ghostly plasma trails. No organized force was left to deal a death blow on the warship. Wounded from poaching, the commander ordered the retreat to safer territory. Sweat-soaked, the engineer coaxed the battered engines into one last, low-power leap to safety, just far enough to avoid immediate danger. They had done it. Thrown the ultimate sentinel of alien power. Those in the galactic watchtowers realized a new chapter in the cosmos had turned in the silence that followed. The unbreakable coalition was broken, their fleets demoralized, their leaders humiliated. Even those who might have doubted could now see that what had once been prey had evolved to predator. In the halls of their rattled ship, the humans patched wounds, exchanged shaky smiles, and mourned fallen comrades who never would live to see this victory. A feeling of triumph, moderated by the stark reminder that many ordeals were yet to come, filled each battered room. They had demonstrated that no empire was truly invulnerable, that guile, desperation, and an uncontainable will to live could bring down whole, galaxy-wide hegemonies. In alien capitals, kaisers and admirals held weighty councils in their private chambers, gripped with trepidation for the future. Their fleets were battered. Their reputation lay in tatters. They had grossly underestimated the adaptability and ferocity of humankind. In one day, the hierarchy of the galaxy had upended, and in the night of star-swept space, one warship limped away victorious, the heart of its hull blackened but its spirit unbroken. And so ended the great confrontation that changed the balance of power among the stars forever. Where the mere mention of human warship had once elicited deriding disbelief, it would now elicit a knee-jerk shudder. The few who saw the last blow at the Raphria corridor would repeat the tale for decades, reminding listeners that collectivism, too, was in humanity's nature. In the days after the flagship's destruction, shock waves reverberated through every corner of the galaxy. Massive alien empires were forced to deal with revolts on their own core worlds when conquered races began to daringly strike out when power was at its most vulnerable. Garrisons that had ruled entire sectors were rising up now against restive, newly emboldened populations, inspired by the knowledge that even the most potent symbol of their oppressors had been crushed by a single human warship. On the battered boat, the mood was one of relief and exhaustion. Decks in tatters, whole compartments decompressed or scorched, life support barely preserving breathable air. But out of struggle came a great sense of victory. The commander hobbled through the corridors, thanking every engineer and soldier who had contributed to the unlikely win. The tactician held the various logs on the warship in the silence of the void, ensuring that battle's final records would remain, both as a testament to the slain and as aid for generations to come, those who might leap against impossible odds. Messages flashed in from disparate human outposts celebrating the warship for landing a blow that had once felt impossible. Messages were tearful, detailing how their families had despaired of hope. Others were joyful exhortations to capitalize on the advantage, to send the warship into a barrage against every alien-thrown world. Others begged for help, showing how local alien rulers threatened brutal vengeance. Each message articulated a common truth. Humankind now bore the burden of newly get opportunity and responsibility. Throughout star systems newly roused from slumber, the warship's triumph became a rallying cry. Minor powers no longer needed to serve or quake before the empires. The hierarchy was not indelible. Black market networks and clandestine smuggler trails constituted avenues for alliance building. Engineers of other species, curious about the warship's field-leading technology, provided covert assistance in exchange for independence from oppression. The empire's cohesive blockade shattered, allowing new trade routes to flower under the banner of liberation. Meanwhile, Earth's greatest enemy leaders, now that orchestration phased out to the faithful execution, now drew penalty of the calculations. In the halls of their erstwhile glorious capitals, they held crisis sessions, seeking either a diplomatic solution or a final militaristic gambit. But they were not to be believed. Most of the underspecies of the universe wouldn't move, whether out of fear or silent admiration for humanity's stance. Plans to re-establish iron-fisted control floundered in the absence of the trust and cooperation of the Empire's splintering domains. The warship, a living legend itself, became an icon not just of revenge but of resilience. Humankind's transition from near obliteration to unstoppable agent reweaved the narrative of the cosmos. Even while the commander and their crew headed towards secret shipyards for long overdue repairs, new possibilities sprung up across the galaxy. On the other, rumors of a wider Terran fleet to follow, or alliances that could bind sworn foes to counter anyone who threatened freedom. But one thing was clear. The golden age of unchallenged alien dominion was over the moment the human battleship had blasted its fury into their ranks. In a repaired observation deck, quiet calm in the air, the commander and the tactician stood side by side, staring outward, into the stars. They heard the echoes of every sacrifice. The billions who had died on Earth, the countless exiles who had drifted the void, the mangled refugees whose hearts still wished for a better day. Gradually, it was becoming a reality. The tactician shouldered, the last time the galaxy would underestimate humans. The road ahead may have more than one war, more than one clash. The commander smiled, discreet, rare, because towards the end humanity itself may not fear to walk it. And so the last message writhed among the celestial loom. In staring death in the face, man found its greatest ally, an indomitable spirit bound with marrow-soaked ingenuity. Any empire that dared cage that spirit now reeled from the lesson. The epoch of easy dominion was over, and in its place now was a new age forged by the iron will of their unwillingness to leave the surface. The greatest mistake the alien empires had ever made was believing they could truly put humans down, for good. In the aftermath of the warship's triumph, that mistake became the cautionary tale of an era. Never again would an interstellar power take the potential of the human race lightly. And if the galaxy retained any doubts, it need only remember the war-torn hull, who swept up among the stars, victorious, and declared to all corners of being that it was ill-advised to underestimate these humans. It was a dangerous folly that so empire would survive twice.